I never expected anything to happen. It was supposed to be just another weekend, another college football game, another group hangout with my roommate and his friends. But by the end of that night, everything I thought I knew about him, and maybe about myself, completely shifted. Let me back up. My name's Jamie, and I've been living with my college roommate Tyler for about a year. We met during freshman dorm assignments, and somehow we ended up liking each other enough not to change rooms. Tyler's your standard golden boy, varsity football, girls lining up to date him, the whole deal. Me? I'm a poli-sci major who thinks sports are mostly an excuse to drink beer in a parking lot. Still, we got along. We had our routines. Tyler would come home from practice, shirt soaked through with sweat, drop onto the couch like he was dying, and ask if I wanted to order takeout. I'd pretend I wasn't checking him out and hand him a menu. Rinse and repeat. I never thought he'd ever look at me as anything more than his dorky, kind of funny gay roommate. And honestly, I didn't want to ruin the friendship by wanting more. Or that's what I told myself. But the thing about football games, they bring out something different in people. That Saturday was supposed to be chill. Tyler had gotten us tickets to the homecoming game, and while I wasn't exactly thrilled about standing in a freezing stadium for 3 hours, I agreed. Mostly because he asked in that puppy-eyed way of his that made it hard to say no. "Dude, you'll love it," he said, tossing a hoodie at me from across the room. "Besides, you need to get out more. You're turning into a hermit," I smirked. Says the guy who spent the last 2 nights passed out with a bag of Doritos on his chest. "Bulking season," he replied without missing a beat. We pre-gamed at a friend's apartment. Tyler's teammates mostly. I didn't know them well, but they were loud, nice enough, and mostly preoccupied with who was hooking up with who. I stuck to my drink, sitting on the arm of the couch while Tyler moved through the crowd, patting backs, laughing, stealing chips from bowls like he owned the place. At one point, he turned and caught my eye, just a glance, a split-second thing, but he didn't look away. Instead, he smiled. Not the usual cocky, playful grin he wore like armor. This one was small, kind, intentional. Something about it made my chest feel tight. The game itself was a blur, not the plays. I couldn't tell you who scored what, but the feeling of sitting next to him in the stands, the way his thigh pressed against mine under the shared stadium blanket, the way he leaned in to yell things in my ear because it was too loud to talk normally. Every time he did, his breath brushed the side of my face, warm against the cold air. He didn't move away when our shoulders touched. Later, we walked back to the apartment. Our friends had scattered, and it was just the two of us, crunching through leaves and talking about nothing. Tyler had one hand buried in the front pocket of his hoodie, the other holding a half-finished hot chocolate he'd picked up after the game. "You're quiet," he said suddenly. I shrugged. "Just tired." He looked at me like he didn't believe that was the whole story. But he didn't push. Back at the apartment, we kicked off our shoes and dropped onto the couch. I turned on the TV, more for background noise than anything, and we sat there, staring at some terrible action movie neither of us had the energy to change. At some point, he shifted, his leg draping across mine lazily. I froze for half a second, until he looked at me and said, "You're warm," like it was the most normal explanation in the world. Okay? He didn't move. Neither did I. The room felt suddenly very quiet. "Can I ask you something?" he said after a few minutes, voice low. "Sure." He didn't look at me when he spoke. "Do you ever wonder what it'd be like if things were different?" I frowned. "Different how?" "Like, if I wasn't who everyone thought I was." I turned toward him slowly. "What do you mean?" He finally looked up. His eyes were serious in a way I'd rarely seen. Vulnerable. "I mean, if maybe I wasn't as straight as everyone thinks." My heart stopped. "I mean, I've never done anything," he added quickly. "But sometimes I think about it. Wonder, you know." I didn't speak. Couldn't. I just stared at him, my brain short-circuiting. "I'm not drunk," he said quietly, "if that's what you're thinking." I wasn't. I knew he wasn't. Tyler had barely had a beer since we got back. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. "I don't know why I'm saying this. Sometimes it's easier to say things when we're alone, when it's just us." I found my voice, shaky but there. "What are you saying exactly?" He looked at me again, not joking, not playing, just Tyler, quiet and unsure. "I think I've been thinking about you for a while now." I didn't know what to say. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. Tyler was watching me now, eyes searching mine, waiting for a reaction, maybe bracing himself for rejection. He didn't look scared exactly, but I could tell this wasn't easy for him. And honestly, it wasn't easy for me either. "I don't want to mess things up," he said after a pause, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I'd rather be honest than keep pretending." I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "Why now?" He gave a half shrug, looking down at the blanket bunched around our legs. "I don't know. Maybe it's been building for a while. Maybe tonight just made it harder to keep quiet." We sat there, the weight of his words hanging in the space between us. The TV flickered in the background, forgotten. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. "You're not messing things up," I said finally. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "I mean, it's a lot, yeah, but I'm glad you told me." His shoulders relaxed slightly, like he'd been holding tension for weeks. "I've never told anyone," he admitted. "Not even my ex. Not even myself, really." I nodded slowly. "So, what does this mean? What do you want from me?" He glanced up, and for the first time, there was something familiar in his expression. His usual confidence, tempered by something gentler. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. "I just know I feel different when I'm around you, like I can be something I'm not sure I've ever been." The room went quiet again, and somehow, without even thinking about it, I reached out. My hand found his on the couch, not gripping, not pulling, just resting there, simple and open. His fingers twitched slightly, then turned over and closed around mine. We stayed like that, just touching. "I'm not expecting anything," he added after a while. "I know I probably sound like a confused mess." I smiled softly. "You do. But so do I most days." He chuckled, a low, real sound that eased the weight in my chest. "You're always cooler than you give yourself credit for, you know." "That's a bold lie," I said, and he laughed again. We sat there until the movie ended, the credits rolling in silence. At some point, his head dropped gently against my shoulder. I didn't move. I didn't want to. Eventually, he murmured, "Should we go to bed?" "Yeah," I said, even though I didn't want to break the moment. He pulled back slowly, and I expected him to get up and go to his room. But he hesitated. "You mind if I crash in your room tonight?" he asked. I looked at him, trying to read between the lines. "You okay?" "Yeah. Just don't feel like being alone." I nodded. "All right, let's go." We got up, turned off the lights, and walked down the hall. My room was colder than the living room, the window still cracked from earlier, but it didn't matter. Tyler stripped off his hoodie, revealing the fitted t-shirt underneath, and climbed onto the far side of the bed without saying much. I slid in beside him, suddenly aware of how narrow my mattress felt with someone else in it. The blankets were thin, and the space between us was practically non-existent. "You good?" I asked, my voice low in the dark. "Yeah," he whispered. "You?" "Yeah." I rolled onto my side, facing away, but I could feel the heat of him behind me. His presence filled the bed, the room, my thoughts. I didn't expect anything to happen. I didn't plan on pushing it, but then I felt it. His hand, tentative, brushing lightly against my back. Just a small touch, barely there. Then he said, "I don't really know what I'm doing." "Me neither," I admitted. His fingers traced the edge of my shirt. "Is it okay if I just stay like this?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. "Yeah, it's okay." The warmth of his touch settled into my skin. It was quiet, intimate, and somehow it didn't feel weird or wrong. It felt overdue. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was nervous, but because I didn't want to miss the way his breathing changed when he finally drifted off. I didn't want to forget the feel of his hand lightly resting against my back. I didn't want to stop wondering what this meant or where it would go. All I knew was this was the first line we had crossed, and it didn't feel like a mistake. I woke up before him. The room was still dim, lit only by the pale morning light sneaking through the blinds. I was lying on my side, facing the wall, but I could feel the weight behind me. Tyler, still close, still asleep. His hand wasn't on my back anymore. At some point during the night, he must have moved it, but I could still feel its warmth, like an echo. My sheets smelled like detergent and his cologne, a subtle mix that made my chest tighten in the weirdest way. I didn't move. Not at first. I wanted to hold on to the quiet, the stillness, because once he woke up, I didn't know what would happen. Maybe he'd be weird. Maybe he'd pretend none of it happened. Maybe he'd regret it all. And I didn't want to find out just yet. But then I heard him shift behind me. A soft exhale. The creak of the mattress as he turned. I felt him freeze just for a second, like he was piecing it all together. Then, in a voice that was barely above a whisper, he said, "You awake?" I nodded slowly, still facing the wall. There was a pause. Then, "Okay, good." Another pause. And then, "So that wasn't a dream, right?" I finally turned to face him. He was lying on his side too, head propped on his hand, eyes tired but alert. He looked like he hadn't slept much either. "No," I said. "It wasn't." He let out a breath, somewhere between relief and panic. "Shit." "Yeah." We stared at each other for a moment. Not awkward, not yet. Just trying to figure out where the hell we stood now. "I'm not freaking out," he said quickly. "Just thinking." I raised an eyebrow. "About?" He hesitated. "I don't know. Everything? Us? Last night felt different," I finished for him. "Yeah." His voice dropped. "Different." I sat up slowly, rubbing my hands over my face. "Look, we don't have to make this into a big thing. We can talk or not talk or pretend it didn't happen. Whatever you need." He sat up too, close enough that our knees brushed under the blanket. He didn't move away. "I don't want to pretend it didn't happen," he said, quieter now. "I don't even think I could." I looked at him. His hair was messy, sticking up in weird directions. He had sleep lines on his cheek from my pillow. And still, he looked good, stupidly good. "Okay," I said. "Then what do we do?" Tyler let out a nervous laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. "I have no idea. This is all new to me. You're the first guy well, you know." "Yeah," I said softly. "I know. And I don't want to screw it up. I don't want to screw us up." That hit harder than I expected. "You haven't," I said. "Not yet." He smiled. Small, careful. "Cool, that's good." The silence stretched again, but it wasn't uncomfortable, just full. Then he said, "Hey, can I ask you something?" "Sure." He looked hesitant. "Do you like me? I mean, like that?" The question should have felt loaded, but it didn't. Not anymore. "Yeah," I said. "I think I have for a while." Tyler nodded slowly, like he was digesting that. Then he looked down at his hands in his lap and said, "Okay, that makes this less terrifying." I laughed. "You're such a dork." He nudged my foot under the blanket. "Takes one to know one." We didn't kiss. Not then. It wasn't that kind of moment, but he reached out and touched my arm, and I leaned into it, and that was enough. For now. Later we got up, made coffee. He stole one of my hoodies because he was too lazy to grab his own. We didn't talk much, but it was easy, comfortable. He stood next to me while I waited for the toaster, shoulder against mine, not moving away. And when he left to go to practice, he paused at the door. "You good?" he asked. "Yeah." "You?" He smiled, just a little. "Yeah." He left, and I sat on the couch, sipping coffee and staring out the window, wondering how long it would take before things stopped feeling surreal, before I stopped replaying every second of the night in my head. Because something had definitely changed, and for the first time, I wasn't scared of it. The weird thing was how normal everything seemed after. Tyler came back from practice like usual, sweaty and loud, kicking his cleats off at the door and dropping his gym bag where I'd trip over it later. He peeled his shirt off in the kitchen while chugging water, and for a second, I just stood there watching him, wondering if I was supposed to do something, say something, about what had happened the night before. But he caught my eye and grinned, and that easy grin was enough to make my chest settle. "You should see Coach's face when I try to run after leg day," he groaned, flexing exaggeratedly. "It's like watching a giraffe on stilts." "Such a majestic animal," I said, dry as ever. He laughed and tossed me the protein bar he knew I liked. I caught it without thinking, our usual rhythm still intact, mostly. But under the surface, things had shifted. I felt it in the way his shoulder brushed mine more often, in the way he lingered in the kitchen a few seconds longer, standing just a little too close when he didn't need to, and especially in the way he'd look at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Soft, thoughtful, like he was still trying to figure out what we were. I didn't push. We didn't talk about it that day, or the day after, not because it was awkward, because it wasn't. In fact, it was the opposite. Things between us felt easier than they had in months. He joked more, I smiled more. We watched dumb reality TV late into the night and ordered pizza like we were in high school again. But it was there, the thing, lingering. One night, maybe a week later, I found him already in my bed when I came back from a late class. He was in a hoodie and shorts, curled up on his phone like it was the most casual thing in the world. "Yo," he said. "Hope you don't mind. I couldn't sleep." I blinked. "My bed's the cure for insomnia now?" "Apparently," he said with a smirk, but his eyes were a little more serious than usual. I changed quietly, pulling off my jeans and sliding into some old sweats, suddenly hyper-aware of everything. How close we'd be again, how small my bed felt when he was in it. He scooted over to make room and I climbed in. We lay side by side in silence for a while, both staring at the ceiling. Then he said, "So, I've been thinking. Dangerous," I muttered. He nudged me with his knee. "Shut up, I'm being serious." I turned my head to look at him. His face was mostly in shadow, but I could make out the lines of his jaw, the crease in his forehead. "I like being around you," he said. "It's easy, and I feel like I can breathe when I'm with you." I felt that in my chest. Deep. "I feel the same," I said quietly. He shifted, propping himself on one elbow so he could see me better. "I don't want to mess this up. But I also don't want to pretend it's not happening." "It's definitely happening," I murmured. He looked down at my hand resting between us. Slowly, he reached over and took it, interlacing our fingers like he'd done it 100 times before. "I'm not ready to come out to the whole world," he admitted. "Hell, I don't even know what label fits. I just know I want to figure this out, with you." The honesty in his voice hit hard. I squeezed his hand. "You don't owe anyone a label. And you don't owe me answers right away either. Just keep being real with me. That's all I care about." He leaned down before I could say anything else, and his lips brushed mine, barely, like he was testing the waters. My breath caught. Then he kissed me again, this time longer, slower. Still unsure, but meaningful. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't movie perfect. It was real. When we finally pulled apart, he looked at me and whispered, "So that just happened." "Yeah," I breathed. "It did." We lay back down, hands still tangled, hearts beating way too fast. Nothing more happened that night. We didn't need more. The line between friends and something else had been crossed again. This time not with confusion or accidental touches. This time on purpose. And whatever this was, it was starting to feel a lot like something real. We didn't tell anyone. Not because we were ashamed, at least I wasn't, but because we didn't know what to call it yet. There was no title, no announcement. Just quiet mornings where Tyler made 2 mugs of coffee without asking, and nights where he ended up in my bed more often than not. Sometimes talking, sometimes not saying a word, but always staying. The hardest part was outside our apartment, around others. In public, his teammates would call, and I'd hear the switch in his voice when he answered. Louder. Sharper, like he had to recalibrate himself to match their energy. Sometimes I'd watch him from across the room while he laughed at some inside joke over the phone, and I'd wonder if I existed at all in those moments. But then, when he hung up, he'd look at me with this half smile, like a reminder. I see you. You're still here. And I was. We didn't talk about what we were doing, not in labels. But the behavior said enough. He started showing up to my classes just to walk me home. Made excuses to be in the apartment when he knew I had a rough day. And he got weirdly protective about people I talked to at parties. Subtle stuff, but I noticed. One night, we were at a house party hosted by one of his teammates. Loud music, too many bodies, the usual chaos. I didn't want to go, but Tyler convinced me with a grin and a hand on my thigh under the table that made it hard to argue. "You'll survive," he said, "and I'll owe you." Like, owe me? Owe me? I raised an eyebrow. He smirked. "Don't push your luck." At the party, I mostly hovered near the kitchen, pretending to be fascinated by the drink table. Tyler was off somewhere talking to a few of the guys, and I was content just observing. I was never the party type. Then this guy, Jake or Jason or something with a J, wandered over and started chatting me up. He wasn't subtle. The kind of guy who thought, "You look like you don't belong here," was a compliment. I was polite, but I wasn't interested. Apparently, Tyler noticed. I didn't even see him approach. Just felt a hand slip casually around my lower back and heard his voice, smooth and quiet but firm. "Everything good here?" Jake looked confused for a second, then shrugged. "Yeah, just talking." Tyler didn't say anything, just smiled that smile he reserved for people he didn't like. The guy took the hint and walked off. "You okay?" Tyler asked once it was just us. "Yeah," I said. "I can handle it." "I know," he said. Still. He didn't move his hand right away. People were around. His teammates, friends, strangers. But he didn't pull back until I did. We didn't talk about it on the walk home. He was quiet, hands in his jacket pockets, jaw tight, like he was working through something. I didn't push. I knew him well enough to let him come to it on his own. When we got back, I sat on the couch, kicking off my shoes. He stood in the doorway for a second, then finally said, "It's stupid, but seeing you talk to that guy made something click." I looked up. Click how? I didn't like it, he admitted. Not in a jealous way. Okay. Maybe a little, but mostly in a real way. Like, this isn't just messing around for me. I care about this. About you. I stood up, slowly crossing the room. "I know," I said. "Me too." He looked at me, really looked, and then his hand reached for mine. "I want to tell people," he said. "Not everyone, not yet, but someone. Just not feel like we're hiding." That hit harder than I expected. "Who?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Maybe my sister. She's cool. She'll get it." I nodded. "Okay. That's a start." He leaned forward and kissed me. Light. Quick, but not hiding. And for the first time since this started, it felt like we were stepping out of the shadow of it. We told his sister the following weekend. It wasn't a grand reveal or anything. We were sitting on the patio behind her place, just the three of us. She was drinking a LaCroix, barefoot in a hoodie 3 sizes too big, while Tyler fidgeted like he was about to give a speech at a press conference. "Just say it," she finally said, side-eyeing him. "You're obviously gonna explode." He laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. "All right, fine. So," Jamie and I are kind of seeing each other. There was a pause. One of those pauses that stretch longer in your head than they actually are. She blinked. "Okay." "Okay?" he echoed, clearly bracing for more. She rolled her eyes. "Yeah, Tyler." "Okay. You look like you just admitted to arson. Do you want me to throw confetti or something?" He exhaled like he'd been holding it in for months. Then she looked at me, and her voice softened. "You're good to him?" I nodded. "Trying my best." Cool, she said, lifting her drink. Welcome to the circus. Tyler looked at me and mouthed, told you she'd be cool. Later that night, after we left her place and got back home, something had shifted. It was subtle, like he walked a little taller, talked a little slower, smiled more easily. He sat down next to me on the couch and put his arm around my shoulders without thinking. We didn't talk much. Just watched some dumb show he liked, his thumb drawing lazy circles on the top of my arm while I leaned into him. Eventually, I said, "You ever think we'd end up here?" He smiled. "Not in a million years." "Yeah," I said. "Me either." He turned his head, looked at me. "But I'm glad we did." I kissed him then, one of those slow, grounding kisses that said everything we didn't need to put into words. There was nothing uncertain about it anymore. No fear. No second guessing. Just us. Over the next few weeks, we stopped hiding. We didn't post anything. No declarations, no status updates. But we stopped avoiding it. He held my hand when we walked back from class. He kissed me goodbye at the door when he left for practice. And when his teammates teased him about hanging out with me so much, he just smirked and said, "Yeah, and?" It didn't matter anymore who saw. He was still figuring it out, where he landed, what label fit, if any, but he let me in for every part of that journey. Some nights we talked until 3 in the morning, just unraveling stuff. Things he hadn't told anyone, things I hadn't even admitted to myself. The more we talked, the more I realized we weren't just falling into something, we were building something. And one night, as we were lying in bed, his arm draped over my chest, he said, "You know, I never thought I'd be this guy." "What guy?" I asked. "The guy who likes another guy. Who falls for one? Who sleeps better when he's not alone?" I turned my head and kissed the top of his hair. "You don't have to be anything but yourself," I whispered. He hummed softly. "Yeah, but I kind of like the version of me I am with you." I didn't say anything back. I didn't have to, because for the first time, everything felt simple, real, and enough.